Great. So, hi everybody. I am glad you're here, and I'm glad we're able to try to tackle some of this together. IEPs are tricky, and understanding kind of what is going on with the schools is really part of the advocacy basics, and I wanted to talk a bit about that. Often we start with educating ourselves about our child. If we've gotten a diagnosis prenatally or early in life or through early intervention, we're doing, as a parent, doing our best to educate ourselves around our child and our child's needs. And that leads to then learning and educating ourselves about systems that we're navigating, whether that's medical systems, special education, all sorts of different systems, early intervention. And in learning more about our child and then the systems we're moving through gives us a lot of room to be able to advocate and to be advocating as effectively as we can. And we also, in the midst of that, learn about how systems don't work too, which can lead to legislating. It can lead to you and others learning more about special education or whatever system, and then being able to say, we need to make some changes about this, and working towards that level of advocacy to try to change some policy. But again, this kind of cycle here of learning more, navigating systems can change from preschool to elementary school, from the school years into the adult system. So the advocacy basic that I really like to recognize is that piece is that we're continually learning about our child and about those other systems. And remembering that you don't have to know everything, that there are other people who have some resources for you, like the ARC, is really helpful. You can go and find other folks who have been navigating these systems and who have tips and ideas. And one other piece about advocacy basics, and this is really helpful in thinking about communicating with the schools and how to negotiate, is just the idea of, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. That we want to find ways that we can document even just tidbits of a conversation or a phone call, doing what we can to create a paper trail. You can have a lot of conversations with medical offices or a special education teacher or the secretary at the school. And if something doesn't get written down, then there's not any proof in some ways behind that. So it's a great thing to be able to think about that if it's not written down, then maybe I don't have to worry about it too. I had a situation where there was a substitute teacher for my son in kindergarten, and she saw me in the hallway one day and she said, well, he is just so socially. And I'm still remembering that, 25 years later, but it didn't get written down anywhere. And so it hurt. The things that were said, do I need to document them? Is it going to be helpful for me to do that? Or does it not matter? Is it not one of my battles that I'm picking? So if that teacher had stopped me in the hallway and said, hey, we're going to add a new IEP goal, then I want to be able to do an email real quickly to say, let's put that in the IEP then. Let's do what we can to tackle that. So these kind of advocacy basics are things that can follow you through a lot of these systems. And so really one of the lovely parts about special education law and how things have changed in this nation in the last 50 years is that we have developed the Americans with Disability Act, and we've developed the Individuals with Disability Education Act. And that special education law at a federal level starts out with this beautiful statement that disability is a natural part of human diversity. And that's the kind of thing that helps you know that you belong, your child belongs, that these laws and policies have been advocated for so that all of our children can have access to a free, appropriate public education. So I'm going to do a little video that I know this was sent to you. Whoops, forgot to click the right thing. I know this was sent out to folks, but I would love to be able to just take a quick look at it together as well, because this is another parent who has taken her advocacy level up to be able to support other families.
An IEP stands for Individualized Education Program. You'll hear people talk about IEP in different ways. There's IEP teams, there's IEP meetings, and the IEP stands for that plan itself. It puts into place what's called specialized instruction, which can be help in the general education classroom. It can be small group instruction. It can be one-to-one instruction. It can even be outside the classroom to help your child get the skills he needs to be able to work in the general education classroom. But sometimes it can be as simple as something called accommodations. And those accommodations are simple changes to the way things are being taught in the environment to help your child get there better. So for example, a child who needs glasses, a child who needs eyeglasses needs those eyeglasses to see better. A child who needs accommodations might just need a change in the where he's sitting, or he may need a change in the way the information's presented. For example, he may not do well with verbal directions, but if the teacher provides them in written form, it may be more helpful to him. There are also related services that can be put into place, things like occupational therapy, physical therapy, counseling services. Those are all related services that help your child meet the goals that are put into place by his specialized instruction. The IEP plan has goals, it has services, it talks about your child's strengths and his needs, and it has what's called a present level of performance, and the present level of performance talks about how your child's doing now. And all the other pieces fit together with how your child's doing now. The goals talk about how we're going to put those services into place to make sure that your child is moving forward, to make sure he's getting the same free, appropriate public education as other children his age. If you have an IEP, the federal law is very clear about who needs to be on that team. The parents are a very important part of the team. You have as much expertise about your child as you can bring to the table, and that's specified that you're part of that team. A general education teacher, an administrator, so the principal of the school or the special education director, a special education teacher, and anyone else who might be part of your child's team, a school psychologist, an occupational therapist, or a physical therapist, are all supposed to be part of this team by law.
Key takeaways. IEP stands for Individualized Education Program. An IEP involves specialized instruction, which can take place inside or outside the classroom. IEPs can also include related services, such as occupational therapy or counseling.
Well, I don't know if your screen locked up, but the video stopped for me and I continued hearing the audio. So hopefully, if you want to see her talking, that's, yeah, the wonders of technology. So you don't have to memorize everything that she shared. And what I would like to do together is roll through some of those questions and things that came up about how to get an IEP. Is your child eligible? What does that look like? What are the parts of that? We're going to talk more this evening about those steps and what that process is supposed to be like legally. And that's going to help us build up some of our knowledge so that in October, when we meet up again, we'll talk more about, again, that communication with the schools, having a paper trail and documenting conversations and information, and then how to navigate some of the, negotiating around, is this the right goal for my child? Does he really need to tie his shoes and learn how to tie his shoes this year, or should we focus on other skills? So that's part of what we wanted to do with this week, and then with our workshop in October. So initially, this whole piece is how do you let the school district know that you are concerned about your child? All the school districts have to do something called Child Find. And through the state of Washington, this is the ages of 0 up to the age of 21. And I actually worked with a family. I'm sorry, what? I heard a comment. I wasn't sure if I needed to stop or I'll keep going. So the state of Washington is looking at every child in these concerns is if there's some sort of disability or particular learning challenge, that then the schools are supposed to help to evaluate and locate those children. So Child Find is one of the ways that that happens, but you can also just make a referral or a request specifically. So a school professional could ask, it could come up at a kindergarten meeting or if in some other context, but parents can also basically ask the school district to evaluate your child. And they do say that the request could be in verbal or in writing, but I really encourage you in this context to put it in writing that we want to be able to give the school district and the school as much information as we can so that they can do a great job in evaluating our child. So I'm going to flip over to the other screen here and show you the school districts and the state of Washington have some amazing forms. And this form is something we'll give you the link. The Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction has a whole page full of what are called model forms for special education. And one of the first ones is specifically this review of a referral for special education. So this is a form that you can get, and we'll give you the link, but you can find it on OSPI's website. I like it because it gives us the words. We might not always know the right language or questions to ask. And so this allows you to look at this and say, you know, there's concerns about attention. We're worried about basic math skills, but instead of you having to write a letter or a short novel on what your concerns about your child are, you can actually just check things off and then add other particulars if you want to. If your child already has some sort of diagnosis or condition that has been recognized in other ways, that is also information that you could add here in this form. So, and you don't have to use this whole form, but you can use the information from it. Because again, the state has a requirement to be able to do these evaluations and learn more about that child and what their needs are. So I'm back to this now. So I have the link here to the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, and we'll share this with everybody. But once the school district has gotten this request, hopefully in writing, they do need to have consent from the parents before an evaluation can happen. And so the school district's going to want to meet and talk some about your concerns and then have those forms signed and work forward then to complete that educational and functional evaluation. So there are some deadlines there to know about as well. And so really this decision to evaluate hopefully is something that's easy for the team to do, that if we know what the diagnosis is of the child, we would look at all the areas maybe related to that suspected disability or diagnosed disability. And the evaluation results are used to decide if somebody is eligible for special education and related services. And as the video said, that piece of specially designed instruction is, does the disability or the learning challenges, does it impact the child's ability to access special education or education? And do they need specially designed instruction in order to access the general education curriculum? And hopefully you're not trying to write all this down, because these words and what I'm sharing with you is actually written down on many of these forms. The law is there and accessible for us so that we can use it and you don't have to be an attorney So once deciding to evaluate a child, really the team is looking at, is that child eligible if they have a diagnosis or a disability as defined by the Individuals with Disability Education Act. They're really looking at, yes, is there a disability of some way? Does this disability adversely or badly impact their education? And does the student need specially designed instruction then? So there's 3 areas that are really the focus to decide whether or not somebody is going to have an IEP. And that helps to move that process forward. The other piece that can happen is you could have an evaluation like this and see that, yes, the student does have a disability, but it's not impacting their education and they don't need specially designed instruction. That's where a 504 plan or a health plan would be another way to look at your child's rights to access the school building or the curriculum in whatever way that they need to. So yes, if a child is found to be a child with a disability, they are then eligible for that specially designed instruction and related services. So the next piece is another meeting. Within 30 days after the child being determined eligible, the IEP team has to meet and to start to write an individual education plan for that child. So there are 13 different categories of eligible categories within specially designed instruction. And I put these up here not so you have to memorize them, just to give you an idea of what the federal and the state officials are looking at in terms of how to support somebody, because special education is also not designed to remove somebody or segregate somebody from education, but is designed to support them in accessing their education. And there are ways that that different categories here may have services and supports that are more appropriate, say, for a student with deaf blindness than may be for a student with other health impairments. So this is where that evaluation team who is sitting and talking about this may be trying to determine, well, would it be better to put Thomas in the autism category, or because we don't have a diagnosis, should we actually put him in the developmental delay category or some other question? So this is part of what an evaluation team is going to look at. How are they making that student eligible for special ed? So then the next piece really is writing that IEP. And so they're really wanting to gather as much information about the child's needs, part on that disability or condition. And then what other information came up in the evaluation that helps us to be able to write that IEP. And one of the pieces about writing the IEP that I love here is that the parts of the IEP are going to include those child's needs from the evaluation, but they help us to be able to define a little bit more. What are those levels of performance so that we can see how Thomas or another student is able to be supported given the variety of classrooms that can exist too, because it's going to look different for a kindergartner than it would, say, for a 9th grader. So we will talk more about the parts or kind of that anatomy of the IEP, but remembering it's the needs are what we are going to very clearly try to define in those present levels of educational and functional performance. And this is where I go back to that mantra: if it's not written down, it didn't happen. If we don't have information in the evaluation that talks about something, let's say that the student has a sensory need, and we've declared that and understand that, but there's something specifically we want to do around that sensory need, that then we could add that section, that information about his needs or her needs into the present levels of functional performance. If it's something like, because of sensory overload, Samantha does need to have access to headphones or hearing protection. If we write that into the IEP, it becomes part of that legal aspect of being able to enforce that your child has these needs, and it is the school district's responsibility to meet them. If we don't put information in there, say about headphones, and we don't have that in under the present levels, it's harder then to go back to the team and say, well, we talked about it, but you didn't put it in there. So if it's not written down, we want to do what we can to make sure some of those things are added as present levels of performance, because it will drive how we teach that student, what services are available to them, and how we report back to the families as well about those. So there are model forms. Again, I shared that information about OSPI, and I'm going to find my next, document here. Where did it go? Oh, there we go. Okay, perfect. Thanks for waiting. So the lovely thing about these state model forms is that they tell us what the law is. And so I came back to this to show you this piece, because the IEP is very much designed to show how the student is included and makes progress in the general ed curriculum. So it says it right there. We're trying to figure out, what is that student's ramp to the classroom, or FM system, or seating arrangement? Because what we need to do to include Thomas in the curriculum is he needs to sit in the front of the room. That's how to include him in accessing the curriculum. And maybe we need to give him specific instruction around whatever that particular topic is. So you don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to know all the law. You can look at this and say, yeah, what are we doing here in this IEP that is allowing the student to be included or involved and make progress in the general ed curriculum? And then this other piece here again, I talked about those present levels of performance. It is on that IEP form. It talks about very specific what we need to do of considering the strengths of the students academically, educationally, and maybe in other areas as well. And we need to also look at what are some of the things that came from the evaluation that we need to put in here as well, so that we can try and meet that student's needs. So sorry, I'm jumping back and forth, but is this going well? All right, cool. So I'll go back to this screen here. So yeah, writing that IEP, we want to make sure we get it in writing. So we know that it happened. We know we had a discussion around headphones and sensory overload. So this is basically how, with the evaluation and with that IEP, that we lay out that the school has an obligation to help this child to have access to and make progress in the general education curriculum. So that IEP, that individual education plan, follows the student. You absolutely should have a copy of that. And each of a child's teachers and other service providers, if they have them, should have access to the IEP and understand their responsibilities for providing services, delivering instruction, making sure that that those supports are provided to the student. And so that's where it's helpful for us to know, again, this IEP and that model form will show you who's supposed to provide instruction, when is it supposed to happen, and how is it supposed to happen. It's all, they've put all of the law onto these forms, which is so helpful. So you, like I said, you don't have to be an attorney. So the IEP and specially designed instruction is laid out specifically on how are we going to involve the student in the general ed curriculum and how are we going to help them make progress. this progress and the school's responsibility towards meeting those IEP goals does need to be reported back to you as a parent. That might be through at the same time as report cards. It could be even every 3 months or even every 1 month that there's some particular information that you as a parent should receive back to find out, how is my child being involved, and are they making progress towards these goals? And if they're not, what is the school telling me? If I was supposed to have speech and language pathology and support and communication, but the SLP, for whatever reason, had to go on medical leave, so my child's not receiving those speech and communication services, absolutely, I understand a staff person being sick and not being in, but I also know that the school district then needs to work to find another SLP or meet our child's needs in some other way. And so that's that responsibility part that goes back to the school district. So knowing when you get a progress report that, oh, we didn't meet that goal, and why was that? That's where the school district in some ways is hopefully writing down why progress wasn't made towards a goal. So as an IEP team, then we can talk about, is there another way to do this? Is there something else that we can do? Then that IEP does need to be reviewed at least once a year and rewritten. Then we look at the goals, we look at what progress our child made towards those goals, and we also look at the needs. We can look at that, the IEP from a year ago, and say, oh, you know what, we wrote down that he only had 4 words he was using to communicate, and everything else was on his iPad. And now he's got a vocabulary of 27 words. So let's add that. It's showing the progress, and it's telling the rest of the team he does have more words, and these are the things we're working towards. If a child has regressed in some way or lost some skills, again, that portion of the IEP that talks about the functional and academic levels is something that we do want to adapt and update as time goes by. Because this is a legal document that follows that student. If that student and the family move to another school, another district, even another state, the school district is supposed to help meet those child's needs, those students' need, wherever that child has moved to, and has an obligation, again, to try to meet those needs. So the other piece that really helps to drive what is in the individual education plan is having any new information from a reevaluation. So let's say your child was in early intervention services, and then when they turned 3, they had an evaluation with the school district and have had an IEP since age 3 to now age 6. We're going to do another evaluation that looks at their needs, their capabilities, and really try to find out if, particularly with the older child, if we can learn more about them. And sometimes those pieces that we've been seeing or not seeing help us open up areas to say, absolutely, we weren't worried about fine motor skills, 3 years ago, but now we're really seeing difficulty with, in a different context, that child being in a situation where they need to have a pincher grasp and they need to be able to hold a pen or a crayon or a pencil. And we're going to look at those pieces about what do we know about this child, as well as what the other students their same age are involved in. And you can do a reevaluation more often. If you were in the midst of, if you'd had an evaluation, say, a year ago, but now your family member has gotten another diagnosis or some other condition that would be helpful for the team to know, you as a parent can share that information with the IEP team and ask that some of that information be included in it basically in the student's academic file, so that the team will need to consider that information from another licensed or certified or registered person, say a doctor, physician, speech pathologist. So you're able to bring in information too that can add to the evaluation or to the reevaluation. And, oh yes, as I shared earlier, the law is written all over the IEP. And so I blew up that one section that was at the top, basically saying the purpose of an IEP is to meet the needs of the student, the unique needs of that student, and how we're going to meet their needs so that they can be included and make progress in the general education curriculum. So that's another piece to know as you educate yourself about the system of schools is what is the general education curriculum? What are all the other second graders doing? And how can we then understand how my family member can be involved and make progress in what all the second graders are doing? And that can even include the general education curriculum can include going to recess. It can include lunchtime. It can include library time. All the other second graders are walking to the library together. So how do we support that student in participating in what the rest of the students are all doing naturally without explicit instruction or support? So it's helpful to think again about this. These words might seem fairly simple, and I like that, but that makes it accessible to us as parents, that we need to know, how's that going to include Thomas in the curriculum? What are those things that you're going to do with instruction around mathematics that are going to help him do what the other second graders are doing? And I know I just like flew through a whole bunch of things. I was going to find one other document because I wanted to show you as well, if I can find it, the evaluation report. Yes, there we go. Thanks for waiting while I find this. So this is an example of what an evaluation could look like. That's going to help in documenting a disability, the students, how that disability is impacting their involvement and performance in general ed, and how we may need to design, especially design instruction and provide services for them. So why I wanted to show you this too, again, is that I have to go down a little bit. There we go. It tells us a little bit more. What are some of the areas that the school district is going to look at? You can think, oh yeah, we definitely want to do some cognitive testing and find out more about IQ and learning style. Or maybe we're very concerned about behavior and social skills. Written language is one area, but the other one is communication. And that could be something like, is a student able to say their S sounds and their R sounds well? Is it articulation, or is it even understanding some communication in some different settings for a child? So these areas of evaluation bring in different professionals. So there are reading specialists with the school districts. There are ways that somebody would look at written language and think about, is this something we should look at similar to dyslexia and do some testing in that way? So as you can see, there's more categories here. What this does is it helps us to get a better idea about those students' needs and how we can best support them. And so I love highlighting the communication piece, because communication is a huge issue. And if a child has a hearing loss, or if they have a developmental disability, or say autism, or on the autism spectrum, they may have difficulty navigating some of those other social situations and understanding when a teacher is giving instruction about how to do something. Does that child, are there receptive languages as well as their expressive language? Are there delays or challenges that student has? So, so yeah, I would love, I'm going to turn off the recording now. And I'd love to talk more and hear